At 11:52 on the night the power went out across most of East Austin, my neighbor knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to go swimming. By 1:15, we were standing on a limestone shelf above Lake Travis under a sky so clear it looked invented, and I realized she hadn't brought anything to swim in. That wasn't an oversight. The way she looked at me when I noticed made that very clear. My name is Sawyer Briggs. I was 29 that summer, working as a structural inspector for a civil engineering firm downtown. The kind of job where you spend your days crawling through parking garages and half-finished buildings, looking for cracks that shouldn't be there. I was good at spotting what was wrong with things. I was, it turned out, considerably less good at acknowledging what was right. I lived on the 4th floor of a building in East Austin, in a neighborhood that had been transitioning for a decade and never quite finished. The rent was too high for what it was. The elevator broke twice a month, on a schedule you could almost set a watch to. But the light through the west-facing windows in the evenings was something else entirely, and I had finally stopped, feeling embarrassed that this was a reason I stayed. Stella Vance lived directly across the hall, Unit 4C to my 4D. She was 26, a graphic novelist finishing her debut book, the kind of person who could spend 6 hours at a desk and emerge looking like she'd just thought of something worth thinking about. She'd moved in 8 months earlier with her boyfriend, a guy named Brennan, who had strong opinions about everything, and once spent 20 minutes explaining to me why our building's facade was architecturally dishonest. I inspected structures for a living, and I still didn't know what that meant. Brennan moved out 3 months before the blackout. He went home to Houston. Stella stayed because she'd signed a lease, and because the light was good, and because she was 3 months from finishing a book she'd been working on for 2.5 years. After he left, things between us changed the way they change when a wall comes down that no one officially admitted was there. We'd always been friendly, the kind of neighbors who held elevator doors and took in each other's packages. But now our conversations lasted longer. She'd sit against her doorframe in the evenings with her coffee going cold, asking about my day. I told her about a parking structure in Round Rock, where someone had patched a stress fracture with what appeared to be caulk and optimism. She told me about the chapter she was stuck on, about how her main character had to make a choice, and she didn't know what choice a real person would actually make. I told her real people usually made the wrong one first. She said that tracked. I had reasons for being careful. 3 years earlier, I'd ended a relationship by letting it go on for 6 months after it was over because I was afraid of the disruption. The breakup hurt less than I expected. That was worse. It meant I'd already been gone a long time without realizing it. Since then, I'd treated emotional proximity like a load-bearing wall you didn't touch until you understood the floor plan. The woman 12 feet across the hall from my front door seemed like an efficient way to collapse everything I'd learned. So when Stella knocked on my door at 11:52 on a night so hot the blackout felt personal, I opened it expecting a dead phone battery or a request for a flashlight. She stood in the hallway with a canvas bag over one shoulder and her car keys in her hand. Light blue sundress, no shoes yet, hair down. The building's emergency lighting threw a dim orange glow across the hall. "Do you want to go swimming?" she said. I looked past her. The corridor was quiet. Someone 3 floors down had a generator running. "It's midnight," I said. "It's 11:52. "Where?" "Lake Travis." "That's 40 minutes away. 35 if you stop asking questions. The park's out there close at 10. I know a place that doesn't." She tilted her head. "You've been inside for 5 days. It's 102 degrees in your apartment." 104, I said. "I have a thermometer." "Then you definitely need to leave." She held up her keys. "Shoes, Sawyer." I should have said no. I had an inspection in Pflugerville at 7:30. I had explained to myself, clearly and more than once, why this was a bad idea. I grabbed my sneakers. Her car was a 10-year-old Subaru that smelled like turpentine, and the lavender hand lotion I had, without meaning to, come to associate entirely with her. She drove with the windows down because the AC had been underperforming since June. "You know I assess mechanical systems," I said as we pulled out of the garage. 4 buildings. The principal's transfer. You could have offered to look at it. I did in June. You said it was fine. I thought it was. It was making the sound of something that had accepted its fate. She looked over, trying not to smile. You're describing a car, AC, like it had an emotional life. Everything has an emotional life, if you listen long enough. She did smile then. It did something to the center of my chest that I did not have a professional classification for. The roads out of Austin were empty. She played a playlist full of songs with too much reverb and choruses that felt better than they probably were. The city lights fell away behind us. The stars came out the way they only do when the grid goes dark. 20 minutes in, she caught me humming. You know this song, she said. I know the general shape of it. You were humming the bridge, specifically. I'm picking up radio signals. There's no one else on the road, Sawyer. I looked out the window. You have a very good ear. She adjusted her grip on the wheel, and her hand drifted to the center console until it rested maybe 4 inches from mine. Neither of us moved. That small distance became the loudest thing in the car. I looked at her profile in the dark. Stella was beautiful in a way that was hard to categorize. Not obvious, more like something that revealed itself in increments. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way she could say, "That's interesting," and make you feel like you'd actually said something worth saying. The way she paid attention to things most people walked past. I was tired of pretending I hadn't noticed any of it. You've been quiet for a while, she said. Thinking. About what? Why you picked me? She was quiet for a moment. Then, because every time I knock on your door for something small, you look relieved that you have a reason to open it. That was more accurate than I was comfortable with. And you thought you'd give me a bigger reason, I said. I thought I'd stop waiting for you to make one yourself. Lake Travis at 2 in the morning was a different world. Stella parked on a gravel pull-off at the end of a private road, where a friend's family owned a stretch of shoreline. There was a combination lock on the gate. She knew the code. You've been here before, I said. Every summer until I was 22. She clicked on a small flashlight. Marta's family doesn't mind. She's been telling me to take a break from the book for weeks. The path opened onto limestone shelf above still water. The lake was black and flat, and the sky above it was the kind of dark you forget exists until you get outside a city. The Milky Way was out. I hadn't seen it since college. Stella slipped off her sandals and walked to the edge. I pulled my shirt over my head. When I looked up, she was watching me. Not incidentally. Her eyes moved across my shoulders before meeting mine, and she didn't look away. Carrying equipment upstairs apparently does something, she said. I've seen you carry equipment upstairs. I know, from the hall. She held my gaze. You've been very careful for 3 months. I'm done being careful on your behalf. She set her bag down beside my shirt. That was when I saw what wasn't in it. A flashlight, 2 bottles of water, 2 towels. That was everything. You didn't bring a swimsuit, I said. She turned to face me. Her expression was unhurried, the same expression she got when she was deciding on a composition and knew exactly what she wanted. No, she said. I waited for a follow-up. There wasn't one. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked at me the way you look at something when you've already decided. You drove me 40 minutes into the dark, I said carefully, knowing you hadn't brought one. I drove us to a lake at 2 in the morning during a blackout. Her voice was quieter now. What exactly did you think I had planned? The ease was still there, but underneath it something less guarded moved. She wasn't performing confidence. She was asking me to stop hiding. She stepped closer. The cedar smell of the lake mixed with the lavender I associated with her doorway, her handwriting on packages she'd left outside my door, the 6-inch gap between us and any hallway we'd ever shared. So, she said softly, are you going to spend another 3 months pretending you don't want to? Or are you getting in? There are moments where you can see your life clearly from the outside. Standing on that limestone shelf in the dark with Stella a breath away was one of them. Before, I could explain every slow conversation as neighborliness, every lingering minute in the hall as coincidence. Every time I noticed exactly how she laughed at her own jokes as just paying attention. After her question, none of those explanations held. I don't need 3 months to answer, I said. Her smile returned. Good, one condition. You go first. She tilted her head. How did you know? You test the load before you commit. Something shifted in her expression, a small quiet recognition. Turn around, she said. I did. I stood facing the far shore, watching the black line of cedar elms against the sky, and I listened to the soft sound of fabric moving and the quiet tap of something landing on the limestone behind me. Then, a splash. I turned. Stella was already in the water, submerged to her shoulders, her hair loose and dark around her. She swept one arm through the surface. Your turn, she said. I hooked my thumbs in my waistband. Her eyebrows rose. You can look away, I said. I could. She didn't. I laughed, turned my back, left my shorts on the rock, and went in. The cold was absolute. I surfaced gasping. You said this would help. It does. I cannot feel my legs. That's how you know it's working. She was swimming backward, watching me. You looked like you needed the shock. I needed it 3 months ago. I know. She said it like a fact she'd been holding for a long time. Not a criticism, just the truth. We swam until the cold became comfortable. She was faster in open water, which she mentioned approximately twice per length. When I finally grabbed the dock ladder, she was already there. One hand on the rail, breathless. Truce, she said. You won. I know, I'm being gracious about it. Her leg brushed mine beneath the surface. Neither of us pulled away. I could see water caught in her eyelashes in the moonlight. Stella. Yeah. Tell me this wasn't a mistake. I can't tell you that. She looked at me. But I can tell you I've been thinking about it since February. February was 5 months ago. That was before Brennan had even left. I'm not proud of the timing, she said before I could speak. But I'm done apologizing for it. I moved closer until the water between us was still. Why tonight? I said. She looked past me at the center of the lake, then back. Because today I found out something, and the first person I wanted to tell was you. And then I thought, if I don't do something about that tonight, I never will. Found out what? My book got picked up. She said it the way you say something you still can't believe is real. By Meridian Press, in New York. My agent called this afternoon. The words took a moment to land. Stella, that's everything you wanted. It is. Her hand tightened on the rail. They want me there, in person, to work with the editorial team on the launch, for at least 6 months. 6 months, New York, the lake got colder. Today was the best day I've had in a long time, she said, and I spent 4 hours of it on my couch, trying to figure out why I felt like I was about to lose something. I looked at her, at the drop of water at the corner of her mouth, at the way she was watching me, open and a little frightened. You kissed me first, I said. Her brow furrowed. I haven't kissed you yet. You're about to. I moved my hand until it covered hers on the rail. I just wanted you to know I noticed. She laughed, a real one, surprised out of her, and then she kissed me. It wasn't careful. Everything careful had already been spent. She kissed me with her free hand behind my neck, and the ladder pressing into my side, and the Texas sky enormous above us, and when we finally separated, our foreheads stayed together. That, she whispered, was the actual plan. You planned this thoroughly for someone who forgot her swimsuit. She kissed the corner of my mouth. We sat at the end of the dock afterward, with our feet above the water. She told me about the book, a graphic novel about a structural inspector who can see the load-bearing failures in relationships the same way she sees them in buildings. She'd been writing it for 3 years. Meridian had found her through a short piece published online, something she'd done in an afternoon and assumed no one would read. That's how the good things happen, I said. You stop forcing and do something adjacent. I was still trying, just sideways. I understood that. The drive home was quiet. Not bad quiet, the kind where both people are thinking hard about the same thing and don't have words for it yet. She kept both hands on the wheel. I watched the hill country fall away into city lights. In the parking garage, She cut the engine and we sat for a moment in the dark. There's something else, she said. I waited. The 6 months. That was the original timeline. She looked down at the steering wheel. They called again tonight, right before the power went out. There's a trade show in October they want the book ready for. The kickoff meeting got moved up. She paused. They need me there in 11 days. 11. That's not a lot of time, I said. No. Stella. I know. She turned to face me. I know what you're going to say. You're going to be careful and reasonable, and say that we should be practical. I was going to say I still want breakfast. She blinked. This morning, a real one, a place with food on plates. I held her gaze. 11 days is enough time to start. Some of the tension left her face, not all of it, but enough. We got breakfast tacos at a truck on Cesar Chavez that opened at 5:30. We ate on the hood of her car while the sun came up over the east side and turned the sky copper and pink. She took the roasted peppers from my order because she'd run out of hers. I let her because I had apparently developed the habit of saving things for her before admitting I'd been saving them. This is theft, I said. You left them in the corner. I was saving them. You always save the best thing and then run out of time. She looked at me sideways. I've noticed. That landed with more weight than she probably intended. In 11 days, we did what we could. She took me through her apartment and explained every panel study pinned to her walls. I took her to a historic theater being retrofitted downtown, and she stood in the empty balcony and looked at the bones of the building the way she looked at everything, searching for the real lines under the obvious ones. We drove out to Enchanted Rock one evening and sat on the granite while the sun went down, and she sketched in a small notebook, and I sat beside her not saying anything, which was the most comfortable I'd been in years. On her last evening, she stood in her apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes and looked at the walls still covered in her working sketches, panel drafts, reference images, color studies overlapping like a mind made visible, and she looked tired and proud and scared in equal measure. I want you to know, I said, that I'm not going to disappear. She turned from the wall. You don't have to say that. I know I don't. I crossed the room. I'm saying it because it's true, and I've been too careful for too long, and you deserve to hear true things. She leaned her forehead against my chest. I was afraid you'd spend the whole night being wise. I'm almost done. She laughed into my shirt. I held her while the city came through her open window, and it all sounded like time passing, and I decided to stop being afraid of time. She flew out Tuesday. What came after wasn't cinematic. Long distance is mostly logistics dressed up as love, text messages across time zones, video calls where the Wi-Fi drops at the worst possible second, the specific misery of watching someone be happy about something you can't fully share. It was her calling after a hard meeting with her editor, and me wishing I could be on the same side of the screen. It was eating dinner over FaceTime in 2 different kitchens, which sounds romantic until the connection freezes mid-sentence 3 nights running. But there were good parts. Every visit was chosen. She flew back to Austin in October and fell asleep on my couch before we finished a movie, and I sat with her head on my shoulder and felt, with complete clarity, that I wasn't interested in any version of my life that didn't include this. I flew to New York in November. She met me at JFK in a yellow rain jacket because she'd been there long enough to dress for the weather, and we spent 4 days walking the city while she showed me what she'd found. She had a favorite block in Brooklyn, a stretch of row houses with all the original ironwork intact, and I told her how the subway tunnels were actually held up, which interested her more than I expected. On my last night, we sat on her fire escape with takeout containers between us. Could you do this? She asked. I looked at the skyline. I looked into transferring my license 6 weeks ago. She turned. Sawyer. There's construction everywhere in this city. I'd be employed for the next 40 years just fixing what people are getting wrong. I looked at her. I'm not moving next month. But I want you to know I've been thinking about it as a real thing, not as a way of making you feel better. She studied me for a long moment, the way she looked at something she was trying to draw, checking for the real lines. I've been looking at 2-bedroom apartments. she said finally. Yeah? One room for me, one for a studio, she paused. There'd be a couch. For guests. For you, when you visit, and then, eventually, not just for that. 6 months after her book launched, I put in a transfer request and lined up 3 conversations with firms in the city. I called Stella from the parking lot of my Pflugerville job site, sitting in my truck in the April heat. She was quiet long enough that I held my breath. Then, I found us an apartment on the 3rd floor of a building from 1912 with the original plaster medallions still on the ceiling. And the structural integrity? I was hoping you'd assess that. I'll want to check the foundation. There's also a very good taco truck 2 blocks away. When do we sign? A year after the night she knocked on my door, we drove back to Lake Travis. Same pull-off, same gate, same code. The summer had gone hot early again. The stars were out. When we got to the limestone shelf above the water, Stella set her bag down and looked at me with the same expression she'd worn the first time. Unhurried, knowing, like she had already decided and was simply waiting to see if I was paying attention. Did you bring a swimsuit? I asked. She opened the bag, 2 towels, 2 water bottles, and folded on top 2 actual swimsuits. She held them up with a slow, deliberate smile. I looked at the lake. I looked at her. Next time, I said, we go with the original plan. She laughed and dropped the bag and took my hand, and we jumped in together, and the cold hit us both at once, and we came up gasping and laughing into the warm dark, and the sound carried out across the water and disappeared into the trees. Some things don't need a better time. They just need someone willing to knock. What would you have done that night? Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between being careful and being honest? Tell me in the comments. And if you'd like to be a little closer to where these stories come from, we've opened memberships. Shorter stories, every week, no ads. Link is below. If this one meant something, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.